Knock, knock, Pete.
I'm here. I'm here.
Okay, no, I'm just checking, man. Come on.
I'm here. Yep.
Okay. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that you can start sharing yours.
Okay. That's good.
In the meantime, now,
okay,
it's amazing. I really didn't know him that much until I think about a year ago that we started, because of another thing that we did. We started having some conversations, and I really enjoyed. Meaning, I enjoyed doing the webinar that we did together, but I enjoyed even more the open conversations about testing that we had, just trying to understand what did we wanted to talk about. And that's why we approached him and we said, hey, we would really like you to talk here and give us a little bit more about your insights into what's happening in testing. I'm pretty sure you will introduce yourself, but he's going to be talking mostly about why we cannot afford not to change the ways that we do things today. So I think that's about it. I'm not seeing your screen, though.
No, I'm getting a message saying I can't share my screen, so I'm not sure what's going on.
That's because I'm a nasty person and I haven't actually opened that. Wait, sorry. Yeah, I had to change this. Let's try now.
Hey, look at that.
Wow, technology is amazing.
There we go.
Not yet. Oh, wait.
So you should be seeing that.
Nice T-Rex.
It's a monster. Now, can I actually start my video?
It will. Oh, I didn't even let you do that as well.
No, it hates me.
Wait, try now.
The system doesn't like me.
I'm sure it will eventually.
Oh, look at that. Oh, I'm a human.
Amazing. So yeah. I will stop bothering and I will let you be. And Mr. Walen, floor is yours.
Okay, I'm going to start with a couple of housekeeping things. First of all, thank you very much to Joel and to Mayan and to Rachel and everybody else behind the scenes. Thanks so much. This is a great opportunity. I'm really excited about speaking today. In case you can't tell, I'm not normally this animated, but some days I am. Okay, so for some of you, some of the ideas that I'm going to be talking about are like nothing new. They're going to be very, yeah, Pete, this is 2020, get on with it. We're so far past this. And yet what I see in my practice doing the things that I do is that there's so many organizations that are still acting this way, that are still acting like the T-Rex on the screen, that they are doing things the way that they've always done. And I've been doing software since the early 80s, and I see the same practices in place that worked great when we were doing MVS JCL stuff on a mainframe, and yet it's not really relevant in a lot of ways now, but people do it for a lot of reasons, but I'll get into that. And so my take is this, that we've got all kinds of things that we need to think about. And so for that reason, I'm saying that we have to evolve or die, because testing has to change. We cannot keep doing things the same way that we always have. Now, what do I mean by that? If I bounce over here and say, once upon a time, we had very predictable processes. We could do things that would just work, and we would have requests, and that gave us requirements, and requirements gave us specifications, and specifications gave us design, and design was cool because design gave us two really important things. One would be like pseudocode or code sheets or mappings, things like that for writing code. And depending on what language, of course, and if you've never had the fun of playing with RPG, be very grateful. Then you had things like test strategy. That was the other thing. Once you had what the code could be, then you could have what the test was going to do. And we were going to cover things that way. And those gave us very, very predictable things. Like the test strategy gave us plans, and plans gave us things like test scenarios and test scripts and test cases. And importantly, it gave us test steps. And so we could have all the details all mapped out very carefully, very neatly, very precisely. And that told us everything that we needed to do. And the best part was that it made sure that we could tie tests back to things back at the very beginning, at the requirements and the expectations and the specifications. So we could say, sure, well, I've got this test case and it's got these test steps and they relate directly to this to this requirement for the software. But the best part was we had process. We had manageable process. We had stage gates where we would check to make sure everything was in place. We had sign-offs where everybody would sit down very formally in a meeting, and a whole bunch of people wearing jackets and ties and things, because at this point it was predominantly men. And the women that I worked with just kind of shake their heads and kind of go, you've got to be kidding. But at this point, for a lot of organizations, it was predominantly men. But they'd sit there in their suits and ties and look very important and sign off and say, yes, this is precisely what we need. This describes exactly everything that we have. And as we'd work along, we might come across something that required a variation agreement. And so that meant that we had things like, oh, we found this field, but we need to move it over 3 pixels. So can you sign off on that? And that was a thing. That was a big thing. But the control factors were amazing because we had structure. We had predictability. We could tell exactly when things were going to happen because we had the structure in place. We knew what was going to happen here. And so then we would know that next this would happen, and this would happen, and this would happen. And people are going, Pete, you're describing waterfall. It's like, sort of. Because I've also seen some people claiming to be agile in one form or another that are following almost identical processes. They just slap different names on them, but they're the same process and they're the same method. And I'm going, that's potentially a problem. But I can see why they're still doing it and why they're doing this. And that's because it gives us easily measured stuff. We can easily show progress. We can say, okay, we've got this number of things done. We've coded this number of requirements, or in this case, use cases. And then that gave us user stories. Yes, I realize that they're not all the same thing, but a lot of people equate them as being the same thing because that's how they handle them. But we had easily measured stuff. We could show progress. We could show we've got this amount written, we've got this amount designed, we've got this much written, we've got this amount test designs done, and then we've got this much coded and this much testing that we can do. We've got all kinds of things that we can do, and we can show this. And then we get down to the really important stuff as far as most of these folks were concerned about measuring, and that was bugs. Because if we've been testing and we've executed 15 test steps and we found 3 bugs, that gives us a relationship to how many things there are going to be in the rest of the system, right? Well, some people certainly think so. I'm not convinced of that. But we had all that stuff. We had all those processes. We had all that measurement. We had all that control. And we could do this cleanly because we've considered everything that could possibly be done before we start doing any actual work. We could define not before we had the requirements, we had the request, and we could flesh out what the request looked like. And then we could safely define requirements. And from that, we could safely design specs and system design. And then we could write code. And I was writing code at this point in my career. So yeah, we could write code. And then we got to celebrate success because we've got all the stuff in place, and we'd have pizza and t-shirts and balloons. And if it was a big project, there would be big banners across the wall of the office, and everything was awesome and everything was happy and things were just amazing. And the best part was if things take too long, not a big deal. If the requirements take longer than we expected, or the spec and design takes longer than we expected, or if any of this stuff takes too long, if any of that stuff is late and it keeps pushing things out, well, the deadline delivery date isn't going to change. So we'll just shorten the test phase, because that's all that we have to do, right? Because we've already figured everything out. And so testing, because we're doing all this really, really good quality work, we can just shorten testing. And then we can still celebrate. We can still have the pizza. We can still have the t-shirts. We can still have the balloons, and we can still have the big banners celebrating what a big success this project is. Now, there's a bunch of people probably who are looking at me as if I'm quite insane. Well, I am, but that's another story altogether. And if you've been in software in any length of time, you may have encountered this kind of a project. And the presumption is that we can define everything precisely. We can put everything into a neat box and say, we're going to do this. And then because we've got these requirements so carefully defined, we can do the specifications and the design work very, very, very carefully. And then we can write tests against that. The best part is we don't have to talk to each other. You can come in with a big binder of stuff and say, here is stuff. Here is information that you can have. And we're going to hand that to people, and this will work. And everything will be awesome. And then we can write the tests. We don't actually have to talk to anybody when we design the tests. And then everything is great. And then we sit down and we can go, oh, when we start testing, we can say, this field has got this label, but the requirements in the design say it's supposed to have this label. So I'm going to write up a bug. This is a defect. And we're going to hand it off. And people are going to look at it. And after they get done laughing, they're going to say, we changed the design. This works as designed. And people are going to get upset and say, but you're not paying attention to my bugs. Well, maybe there's a reason for that. But that led to this thing, which maybe you have seen or heard about. Because what I found is a whole lot of people have heard about this phrase that's on the screen, but they don't necessarily know the background. And there's a knee-jerk reaction that says, test isn't dead, it can never die, test is needed. And it's like, okay, but that's not what this means. Where it came from was the Google Technical Conference in 2011. The opening keynote was by a then young man by the name of Savoia. Interesting character, had some interesting ideas. Loads of people were miffed. A few were kind of put out. They were not thrilled with what he said. But what he said was essentially, we're doing all this stuff wrong. We have to change how we're doing things. We cannot look at things the same way. We cannot rely on static stuff. Except I see lots of companies that are working this way still. I see lots of companies that think this is good. I see lots of people working in those companies who really like it this way. Maybe you're one of the people that I'm talking about. You're going, Pete, that's how we work. Why are you dissing us? This is how my organization functions. This is how I've been told is a best practice. How come you're saying these things? And that brings us back here with this rather baffled pterodactyl cartoon character. For a lot of organizations, especially those that are bound by contractual obligations, these things give us activities that are easy to measure. They are easy to track. They are easy to show progress. And the best part about that is we can make nice pie charts so we can show people we've got this much done, we've got this much that's in this process, and we've got this much to do. Everything down here is to do. But we can show that in a controlled, measured manner. And that tells us something. The kind of testing that was proclaimed dead in 2011 is absolutely not dead. It is alive and well. What I would suggest gently, and this is a theme that if you've been paying attention the first 2 days, there have been ideas of this and elements of this that have been getting invoked. Paul Gerard talked about this in a different way the very, very first session. And Jana, I've forgotten her name, with the dragons. Awesome presentation. If you didn't see it live, look up the recording and when it's available. And she had some really, really good ideas that I think are worth considering. Marit always has got good stuff. Find Marit's presentation and have a good, solid listen. And of course, Mike Lyles jumped in with some good stuff, ideas around working and functioning and doing things better. Yesterday's sessions I missed completely because work. But Anne-Marie has always got good stuff. I'm looking forward to seeing the recordings from yesterday. But the idea is, let's do something else. Let's try this weird thing called conversation. If we're working remotely, I'm looking around to see my phone. There it is. We can pick up our phone and call somebody. Or you can jump in an instant messenger and call them over instant messenger, or type in a message. My current client uses Jabber, so we can type in, send a quick instant message. Hey, can we talk for a minute? I've got a question about this. I've got a question about that. You've got XYZ. I don't quite understand how you get to Z from X. Can we talk about that? And then get on the phone and call them, talk with them, actually talk with them. Conversation is so important. Collaboration is part and parcel to that. Working together as colleagues, as a team. In the old days, and I'm talking way 30 years ago, 40 years ago, longer ago than I probably want to admit, when you sat down and worked, the roles and things that we see they were kind of there, but not so much. And it was literally people sitting down without worrying about rank or position or authority, rolling up the sleeves and solving a problem. Together, we collaborated. And so juniors and seniors and novices, freshers were all in together, all exchanging ideas. The cool thing was everybody was learning together. You could always learn from somebody. That's the key to collaboration and communication. Get information to people in a way that they understand it. The 3-ring binder, probably the absolute worst way to communicate. Two-way conversation is much, much better, but we need to communicate. We need to learn from each other as equals. It doesn't matter what your job title is. It shouldn't matter what the job titles are, but we need to learn from each other. Importantly, we need to forget the buzzwords. We need to forget why we're doing stuff. We need to use language everybody else in the organization understands. We need to focus on why we're doing the project. Instead of looking at, well, we've got this story, and so it's got these things that we need to test, and so we're going to test this and this and this and this and call it good. What if instead we focus on how does this story impact the feature that we're working on, or the broader function that we're supposed to be delivering? Can we make that happen? Let's not worry about checking the boxes. I've got 5 requirements. Yeah, you can see all 5 fingers. We've got 5 requirements. Ding, 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 ding. So that means I need 5 tests. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Great. Let's do that. I've done that. I've done my bit. I've got 1 for each, which is probably a terrible way to think about testing, but so many organizations do. Of course, so many organizations also think about that way about development, because we've got a checkbox, we've got a list of things, and then we've got another list of things, and we're good. So forget about that. What if instead the people who are testing specialists, which most people call testers, help the developers, the people writing the production-facing code, understand what they're trying to work on? The developers, the people writing the production-facing code, and it doesn't matter if it's UI or API or database level stuff, developers help the testers. Can we do that? Because the organizations where I've worked with that did that, and that where I had engagements with, they were really amazingly successful, and they got stuff done. Where I see people struggle is where those things don't happen, because if everyone learns together, everyone can improve. Everybody can get better together. Perfect. We've just solved all the problems with software development and testing, right? We found everything that companies are doing wrong. Companies have to totally change things because that's just the way it is. This is what I started out telling you about. Therefore, the problem is solved, right? Everything is good. Oh, look, 15, 20 minutes into it. Great. Presentation's done, right? Because we hit all the main points. Companies are doing everything wrong. You know, maybe. I've just got one more question, which if you were in the United States or North America at the same time that I was when I was young, there was the TV show Columbo. A rather bumbling detective that everybody would kind of laugh at because he was disheveled and messy, and he as he was about to head out the door, he'd turn around and say, "I've just got one more question." So that's kind of where I'm at now. I've just got one more question. The testers, the people who label themselves as testers, who identify as testers and say, "I am a professional software tester." Do testers need to change? I mean, really, is that what that means? Because I see an awful lot of people with the attitude of course not, because their job is to find bugs. Their job is to show people that the software is broken and to break the software and to smash it into a gajillion pieces and scatter it across the floor, right? Right? Nope. Absolutely not. Testers, as individuals, as professionals, as students of the craft of software, not testing, but software, testers must evolve as well. How do we do that? How do we evolve testers? There are some obvious things. We need to grow. We can learn. We can learn to read code. I got into this by writing code, and then I was really good at testing things and finding how things fit together. And that's how I eventually moved into software testing predominantly full time. Because when you come in with a certain mindset, I don't know what it means to have a developer mindset or a tester mindset. It's just one of those things that people use, and I just kind of don't worry about too much. But if you can learn to read code, you can understand the challenges that the developers have. Now, you don't have to be an expert at reading code, but you need to be able to figure it out, to suss it out. There we go. Helps if I click on the right button. We can learn to write code. Yeah, I wrote code a long time ago. Since then, in the last 10, 15 years, along with the stuff that everybody takes for granted now, things like Java, JavaScript, SQL. Okay, I admit I've been doing SQL a long time, but you can do those things. HTML, I know HTML isn't technically a code, but once upon a time it was considered that way. C#. I'm not the world's fastest coder writing C#. But if you ever read Tolkien and talks about the people of Bree, there's the expression, it can see through a brick wall in time. You don't have to be quick, but you have to be patient and thorough. If you can learn to write code and you can learn to deal with things, you can improve your software testing. We have to expand the circle of learning. We have to look beyond what people have typically said, this is how you do better testing, and rethink what it is that testing can be. How do we do that? Things like this. Online Test Conference is an amazing opportunity. True story, I was a conference chair for another conference that was launching and that was going to happen in 2015. And in 2014, there were a group of us that were planning, that were getting ready for this big conference in 2015. And somebody said, you know, what if we tried doing something that was just all online? It's like, yeah, that's an awesome idea. Let's talk about that after we get this one that's going to be in person in the city that I live in launched and done. Then we can talk about it. And as we're having this discussion and we're about to go and launch the conference, I see an announcement. Online Test Conference. Going, huh. Somebody beat us to it. That somebody was Joel and the people here. You can do things inexpensively and learn. You can do things by finding other sources of information outside of your organization. You can do things like that, but it's not just testing conferences. Go to find development meetups. There are, in the city that I live in, which is in Michigan in the States, it's not that big of a city, but there are 5 different development meetups. There's one for Java. There's one for that is specifically web development. There's one that's that is a generic dev meetup, and then there's a couple that are more language specific. But you can join. If they don't charge you to attend, join. Don't have to say anything. Just sit and listen and absorb. The things that they say, ooh, that's a cool idea, write it down, look it up. True story. First time that I was doing a code review, this was several years ago. I was a software engineer, senior member of the technical staff for the marketing cloud of Salesforce. And I was in a code review, my first code review. Here I am, a QE sitting in a code review. I was like, okay, Pete understands SQL and he understands enough about C# to be dangerous. And looking at the code, and the way that my team practiced it then would say, okay, here's the code, you can check it out and make notes, and then in the discussion, ask questions. Fine, fair enough. Fairly similar to other code reviews that I've seen. Made a note, and I literally looked at a thing and I said, this line down here, what does this command do? And it got very, very quiet. And I thought that I'd made a huge mistake. And one of the guys says, Pete, oh, wow. Why are we doing that? Oh, Pete, that's a great catch. Why are we doing this? Because this would be so much better. And they went off on a tangent. And I wrote the command down to look it up, because what I was really asking was, I had never seen that command before. What did it do? But at this point, you just kind of let them think you're an expert and you just kind of run with it, right? But there's other things that you can do to learn. Self-paced learning, Test Automation U, amazing set of resources, amazing set of courses available. Last I knew, there were 25 or 30, and that list just keeps growing. If you need something where you have to chip in some money so you feel like you're invested, there are low-cost options like Udemy. You can do things like that and learn something. And in doing that, we can then move forward. Because we have to evolve everything, not just the code. We have to evolve not just the code that we're writing, not just the code that is going to be executed. We should be able to test the request and test the story. What's the purpose of this? What is this really going to do? And people are going to say, but Pete, that's what the BA is supposed to do, or that's what the product owner is supposed to do. And it's like, people are going to come in with their own biases and their own understanding of everything. Just like a developer is going to say, when they finish the piece of code, they're going to say, here it is, everything is perfect. And our job is to understand how the software actually works, not how they think it works. The same thing can be applied to the request or to the story. It can be applied to the requirements. It can be applied to the design. We can do all those things. We can test the requirements. We can test the design before a single line of code has been written. When people ask me, how do I think of software? And I said, or software testing. This is my working definition that has been that way. I've been using this since early 2014. Software testing is a systematic evaluation of the behavior of a piece of software based on a model. Models can be anything that we're looking at. They can be used to go and evaluate anything. It doesn't have to be working software. My short take on this is, if the only thing you're going to test is executable software, you in your organization are doing it wrong. You must grow from that. You must evolve. You must do things differently. Because if you don't, there is going to no longer be a need for you sooner rather than later. You can grow or not. That's up to you. I suggest that we all learn and we continue to learn. That was it. That's everything I had prepared. Thanks so much for your kind attention. I'm going to bounce over here and see what the chat looks like and see what the Q&A has. I don't know quite what's going on, but that's okay. I'm just in a great mood because I get to talk about software and testing, and I've got coffee. Now, let's talk.
Okay, what do you want to talk about? No, seriously. There's some people here actually writing about it, but it's long, so I need to go into that a little bit.
Uh-oh.
Okay. This looks a little bit long, so we'll get to that in a second. Or if you want to skim over it, go ahead. But I have another question.
Okay.
A lot of people are saying, and I am one of those, we need to test before, and we need to concentrate, as you were saying, on requirements, and not only go over code. By the way, I'm a strong believer that 80% of your testing, if not more, will be done on production. So focus quite a lot on that. As much as you can, make sure that you have enough instrumentation and analysis basically you will need to become a data scientist. But this is something that is hard to sell, especially if you're on the other type of organization that you mentioned. And by the way, that is something that I usually tell people, if you don't want to evolve, it's okay, because there are enough organizations still working waterfalls with AS400s. And I know because I meet these people. But if I do want to change and I need to educate, because whether I want it or not, people are not on the same evolutionary step that I am. How can I sell it? How can I eliminate that skepticism, that even fright of change?
That's an excellent question, Joel. I normally have got a couple of cartoons handy. I don't have any today. That I would just pop up and say, here, this cartoon explains it. I didn't think about that in advance. I should have. Note to self, make sure that you've got cartoons lined up that will be funny responses. It depends. A lot of organizations, and I've seen this time and time again, a lot of organizations are going to come in and say, this is how we do things, and this is how we always do things. And that's fine for that organization. My concern is that if you leave that organization for whatever reason, you are never going to find another place like that again. You get comfortable. When you get comfortable, you get stuck. When you get stuck, you cannot change. By the time you realize you need to change, it's often too late. And you've been replaced by somebody who can do it cheaper. And that cheaper person might not be a person. It might be some automation. It might be some form of AI. It might be something where there's not actually a human being doing the work. But your work, if all you're doing is checking boxes and doing this stuff, your work can easily be replaced.
So it's more about understanding that if and when you need to move, you will not have the skill set that will be quote unquote sexy, and sorry for using the word, enough in order to be hireable.
That's part of it. I would add one little thing, and that's it's not necessarily a skill set if you need to move. And it could be a cultural mix thing. And I recognize that some of this is very aimed at people who are perpetually looking for the next adventure. That's kind of me. I like doing what I do. I'm almost always looking for a new adventure. And if you're comfortable doing what you are doing and you never want to have to do anything different ever again, you like waking up at whatever time you wake up and you do this work and you do this stuff and you do these things within this box, that can be okay. In my mind, that is a very that's very similar to what the neighbors that I had when I was growing up, what their dads, when I was a kid, what the fathers, what the dads, and some of the mothers did when I was a kid. They would get up in the morning and they'd go and they'd do the 2 and 4 rivet on the assembly line across town. And they'd be paid a reasonable price and they'd come home. And that would be that. If that's where you see yourself, that might be okay. I don't see myself that way. I don't see myself in that position. And so when people say, but I don't want to have to change, it's like, you don't have to. But you may find yourself where you must change. So even if you're not going to use it in this job, maybe not the next job, keep learning, keep understanding, because odds are you're going to get better at the way that your job is being done now by learning something different. Because you can almost always find something and apply it and do your job as it's defined better.
Okay. Now, there are a bunch of other comments here in the Q&A, and I recommend people just to switch it over to the Slack, because we don't really have a lot of time. But I want to ask you a question, and I'm going to be nasty, and I'm going to tell you have a minute and a half to answer. And I know that I'm being unfair. And but I was able to read over part of what one of the people in the QA were saying, and I'm going to synthesize it. And this person saying, so I do have kind of a similar technical background to what you have, and I know this, and this, and this, and this, but still, I don't feel comfortable enough to go over the code of a developer and point and say, this doesn't look good. What do you? I know what I would answer to that, but I want to hear what you have to answer to that. And
it's funny
synthesize
that you're saying that. I'm actually reading it on the screen right now, and I was like, yeah, exactly. I understand. That's why you keep learning. Even you at least learn the fundamentals of the code, even if you can't say you're doing it wrong. That's not the point. The point is to learn to understand what's going on. So
go.
Because if you can understand better as a tester what the developer is trying to do and the problems that they're struggling with, because yes, exactly. COBOL, you had maybe 2 or 3 ways of doing something. C#, you've got scads of ways of doing things. And then there's other languages that I don't know that have probably got even more ways of doing the same simple function. But understand what some of those are. That's all.
Okay, and I can give you another approach. Whenever I go over, I don't even call them code reviews, I call them walkthroughs. My objective is not to be a compiler. We have compilers for that. We have all sorts of static analysis tools for that. What I usually do, I sit with the developer and I said, hey, can you walk me through your code and explain to me what this does? Because it's not that I'm going to tell him what's good or bad, but it's incredible how many times as this person is verbalizing his code to you, he goes like, wait a second. Oh, I didn't think about that. Okay, they write it down and then they will go ahead and fix it. Because when I need to explain it to someone else than my internal voice in my mind, stuff starts sounding differently. And you don't need to know anything about it. You only need to have the logic of the application. And if there's anyone who has the logic of the application right, it's going to be the tester.
Absolutely. And that's where it comes into the question of do you understand what the business purpose is? Why is this change being made? And if you can understand that, then you can ask questions in a meaningful way of the developer. Whether you know the language or not, doesn't matter, but you can ask a meaningful question.
Because you know the language of the application. You don't need to know the language where it's written.
Right.
Excellent. So I want to give the audience 5 minutes because people are telling us that we're sticking one to the other and they need to go to the bathroom and take care of their kids or walk the dog, whatever. Pete, as always, we need to do this more often.
Well, thank you very much. This has been a pleasure.
And it's been more of a pleasure to us. And thank you very much for sharing.